The president has not let up because he has just had it.
President Trump's attorney, Rudy Giuliani, tells Fox News that special counsel Robert Mueller told him 2 weeks ago that his Russia investigation could end by September 1st.
Day one, I said, no special counsel, no finger pointing, no criminal prosecution. Let's have an independent, nonpartisan commission looking into this election.
Mike Pompeo is set to lay out a plan B for countering Iran. The comprehensive strategy involves reimposing sanctions.
The Billboard Music Awards takes up gun control.
I'm so sick of moment of silence. Like, God, it's not working. Why don't we do moment of action? Why don't we do moment of change? Why don't we change what's happening?
Hillary Clinton, she's still out and about. She was at Yale University yesterday, still talking about
Pathetic.
the election.
I went for long walks in the woods. I had my fair share of Chardonnay. I practiced yoga and alternate nostril breathing. No, I'm not over it.
Suddenly the sun goes up and I feel my love flooding back again.
Rudimental. Who are they?
They would know. They're opening our 8 o'clock hour on this.
That's who they are.
They must be good.
Yeah.
They must be.
And it's a good song because the sun is out this morning. Finally.
I like any song that I can dance to. You know that.
Well, then get up and dance.
I wish we had time, but it's
We
not in
gotta-
the format.
We don't like that, but you
9
do.
minutes. Go
No,
ahead.
wait a second. No, this says no dancing. What a shame, because I really am in my element.
All right.
Well,
let's
good
talk
morning to all
let's
of you.
talk about
Happy
the
Monday.
president who's tweeting like crazy right
Yeah,
now.
he is tweeting right now. In fact, he says, well, this is from yesterday. He says, I hereby demand, and will do so officially tomorrow, which is today, the Department of Justice look into whether or not the FBI DOJ infiltrated or surveilled the Trump campaign for political purposes, and if any such demands or requests were made by people within the Obama administration.
Right, and what he's talking about are these stories that have been floating around. Daily Caller actually had the story about 3 weeks ago and named this Cambridge professor. And it sounds like he enticed, among others, Carter Page and George Stephanopoulos. I did it
This
again.
twice in one
George
morning.
Papadopoulos to meet with him. And in fact, apparently he paid George Papadopoulos $3,000. I saw a story this morning.
Yeah. Okay.
I saw a story this morning that apparently this particular government informant who worked for the FBI has been paid hundreds of thousands of dollars over the last couple of years, and he was actually still reaching out to Carter Page as of summer of 2017, which is extraordinary because you would have thought, well, it probably ended at the end of the campaign, right? Nope.
So
right through.
the Deputy Attorney General, he is responding, Brian. I just want to make sure we read that. Rod Rosenstein, he says, if anyone did infiltrate or surveil participants in a presidential campaign for inappropriate purposes, we need to know about it and we need to take appropriate action.
So listen to this clown's, this character's name. He's a Cambridge professor, 73 years old. He got paid $282,000 in 2016, called into public records. He got paid in 2017 $129,000 to the Defense Office of Net Assessment, which is essentially a shady think tank. The problem in the past, he has worked for Bush and Reagan, and when Bush was Reagan's running mate.
But not as a spy.
Right, but he was implicated in a paying scandal, which CIA gave inside information on the Carter administration to the GOP. He seems like somebody, like Robert Mueller, perhaps, and James Comey, definitely, that is a Republican who's not a big fan of President Trump. So he was somehow, and that's my conclusion, because he was put into action, it seems, to speak to Carter Page at a seminar and have Papadopoulos come in here and write a
Stephanopoulos.
paper. Come over here and write a paper for $3,000, a paper, and then they have a meeting. And then he never heard anything.
What about
after
this
that.
ambassador from Australia? He was also not a fan of Trump.
Yeah,
Come to find he paid
Ambassador Downer.
millions
Right.
of dollars into the Clinton Foundation.
And you start to put all the pieces together and you realize, wait a minute, if the investigation officially started on this date, and yet this guy was fishing around trying to make contact with these other people who were in the Trump orbit months earlier, that blows up the entire narrative. So nonetheless, now we've got Rod Rosenstein, the Deputy Attorney General, saying, okay, we're going to have the independent Inspector General of the DOJ investigated. Alan Dershowitz says this is better than if they had a special counsel like Mr. Mueller.
And this election was not the finest hour. Whether there were infiltrators or spies put into the Republican camp, whether Strzok did have a hatred and an insurance policy, whether there was any cooperation with any Russian sources, we need to get to the truth. And the only way to get to the truth is an independent 9/11 type commission, and we have to prevent it from happening in the future. This election is a model of what should not happen in the future, and a special counsel is the worst way of getting to the truth.
He's angry for the country because he said from the beginning, Brian, where is the evidence? Where is the hardcore evidence that ultimately led to this investigation? Because all we've seen up to this point seems more like opposition research, and that is not enough to open up this Mueller investigation.
I laugh when people say, why doesn't President Trump just let this play out? Because it was a rout, because no one was going to bat for himself, for his team. He had John Dowd and Ty Cobb, who were fine lawyers, but they just said, let's just sit back. How did that go? So after a year, he enlists Rudy Giuliani, he changes his tone, and he's making people come up with answers. At the same time, Devin Nunes and Trey Gowdy doing yeoman's work are trying to get to the bottom of this thing. And by the way, the bottom is as ugly as you can imagine. And he just wants the other side to get out. And now I think the pressure campaign is working because Rudy Giuliani, we have not heard from the Robert Mueller team, says September 1st. They'll wrap up everything if the president sits down in July. My feeling is if you see Michael Flynn, if you see Paul Manafort, if you see Papadopoulos, and you see these people, these indictments are coming down for things unrelated
And who's
to
to
this
say-
investigation. If I'm the president, I still don't sit down with this guy.
Well, and who's to say that after they do that sit down, Mueller's not going to say, oh, you know what, we need more time. There's more information we didn't realize we had. They also, Giuliani said they want to speak to this spy, to this professor, because the professor could have said anything that he wanted to the FBI. And they ran with it.
Sure. And keep in mind, Rudy is negotiating with Mueller. He's saying, okay, if I give the interview with the president to you, what do I get in return? And now Rudy wants to play up the angle that there was a spy during the Obama years who was working apparently for the FBI looking at the Trump team.
All right. Well, guess who also is speaking out? I don't know if you've heard much from her recently. Hillary Clinton. She has a book out, I heard.
Yeah, I heard she lost, and she's not taking it well.
No, she's still not over it. This is exactly what she told folks at Yale yesterday. Take a listen.
No, I'm not over it. I still think about the 2016 election. I went for long walks in the woods. I spent hours going down a Twitter rabbit hole. I had my fair share of Chardonnay. I practiced yoga and alternate nostril breathing. Today, as a person, I'm okay, but as an American, I'm concerned. So I brought a hat too. A Russian hat. If you can't beat them, join them.
So there you've got Hillary. She's still not over it. But keep in mind, this is a potent message for a lot of people across the country who still are also not over it. They feel like, oh, look, she won the popular vote. She should be president.
She did say mistakes were made.
I think it kills Democrats to have her out there. I know it's a commencement speech, but the more she steals the spotlight from other Democrats, nobody else steps up.
Well, you know who agrees with you?
Yeah,
Candace Owens, who was on our show from Turning Point USA. She had a message woman to woman to Hillary Clinton.
Seriously, woman to woman, Hillary Clinton, you have got to move on. This is not even about politics anymore. It's not healthy to hold on to something like this whatsoever. She says that she's a strong woman. What sort of a strong woman is not over this a year and a half later and is still crying about the election, blaming people and pointing the finger? This is not an example of a strong woman.
We asked you for your comments. Robert emailed us. He wrote, here is a list of the top 1,000 real reasons that Hillary lost the election. Item 1, Hillary. Item 2 through 1,000, repeat item 1.
All right, this comes in from Linda. Says they could not find a better speaker. The graduates have to sit there, listen to her rehash why she lost the election. Well, they could just read her book as well.
Yeah, I'm sure in the Northeast, that's what they want. Hillary's biggest mistake was attacking Trump nonstop during the campaign because she had nothing positive to offer. Clearly, she had not learned her lesson. There's a recent poll out now that they asked the Democrats, Democratic voters, what do you want? And they said the last on the list was attacking Donald Trump.
Yeah.
They want to hear other things besides attacking Donald Trump.
Yeah, you know why? Because they want to win. They realize that's not a winning strategy because that has nothing to do with any of their policies they're going to put forward to help people's lives.
And
right?
smart Democrats like Chuck Schumer say the same thing. If you notice, Schumer, whether we like him or not, understands politics. He never calls for the president to be impeached. In fact, he actually agrees with the president when it comes to China and trade.
But they've kind of all turned that way after the early choruses for impeachment.
You know what
Anyway,
colleges want to hear? Inspiration. Let's get back
They do.
to inspiration, talking about a
Go
better
out there,
future.
kids, and be something.
What do you think, Jillian? Isn't that what students want to hear?
I think
Go out
so.
to the real world?
I think so.
Make a better
I don't
life
know,
for
I li-
yourself?
I like those uplifting speeches.
Yeah, we need more of that.
Yeah.
What
All
else
right.
is going on?
We are covering a lot of stories this morning, starting with this. So let's get you caught up here. A father accused of intentionally slamming his Jeep into a restaurant, killing his own daughter and daughter-in-law is due in court today. Restaurant staff say Roger Self had his family seated, then went outside and crashed into the building in North Carolina. This was just west of Charlotte. The family had just left church together. It's not clear what set him off. His daughter, Caitlin Self, was a sheriff's deputy. A presidential election sparking outrage in Venezuela, a country in economic crisis. President Nicolas Maduro easily winning a second term amid claims of vote rigging. Maduro claims to have received more than 67% of the votes. Florida Senator Marco Rubio slamming the results, tweeting, quote, Maduro claims he received more votes than the total number of people who actually voted. Tomorrow, the U.S. and international community will respond as necessary. And President Trump just tweeting about a potential trade breakthrough, writing, quote, China has agreed to buy massive amounts of additional farm/agricultural products, would be one of the best things to happen to our farmers in many years. Stuart Varney weighed in earlier.
It's a long-term negotiation where our government and their government are trying to work out a new and balanced trade relationship, the most important trade relationship in the world.
The two nations also announcing positive strides on intellectual property protections and reducing the trade deficit. The White House now putting tariffs on hold with China as negotiations move forward. Today, President Trump will attend the swearing in of Gina Haspel, the CIA's first female director. The ceremony will be held at the agency's headquarters in Virginia. Haspel winning Senate confirmation after overcoming concerns of her role in the agency's enhanced interrogation tactics. President Trump nominating her to lead the CIA after tapping former director Mike Pompeo for Secretary of State. Let's look at your headlines, and we'll be watching that.
Thank goodness
We
he
will.
passed.
Yes.
That's going to be great. Just gonna
Another
be
busy day.
Yes,
All right,
it
thank
is.
you.
That role. Thanks, Jillian.
Meanwhile, President Trump demanding answers over reports the FBI infiltrated his campaign. So what happens next? We're going to talk to constitutional law professor Jonathan Turley.
And the Billboard Music Awards. I happen to miss those. But apparently it took up gun control last night. NRA spokesperson Dana Lash is here. She is fired up. She wants to respond. You don't want to miss it.
I'm so sick of moment of silence. Like, God, it's not working. Why don't we do moment of action? Why don't we do moment of change? Why don't we change what's happening?
President Trump demanding answers to those reports about an FBI informant close to his campaign. Here to weigh in on all this, George Washington University law professor Jonathan Turley. Jonathan, good morning to you.
Thank you.
You know what? In what we've learned over the last 72 hours, suddenly some of those things that the president has said over the last year about, I was wiretapped and they were keeping an eye on me, it's starting to make sense, isn't it?
Well, it is. I'm mystified by the response in the media. I mean, I think it is undeniable that the president's early allegations have been validated to a large extent. I think you can acknowledge that without necessarily saying that this was clearly done for the wrong purpose. I also don't understand why there isn't more of a concern here.
Right.
Look, the investigation may find that there was a valid reason to investigate. Clearly, Page was under investigation long before the campaign. But we've always been very critical of other countries where governments put their opponents under investigation. And there's a legitimate reason here for us to be concerned, and I think the president has raised that.
The suggestion that there was a spy who was either inside or really close to the campaign, and you read the story about this Cambridge professor who's been outed by a bunch of papers, suddenly it makes sense. He offers George Papadopoulos $3,000, come write this thing, let's have some meals, let's have some talking. Next thing you know, George Papadopoulos gets in trouble. So you can understand the worry on the president's part. Was there somebody near him? But nonetheless, shouldn't it have been the attorney general who a month ago should have said, hey, wait a minute, you're right, we should do some investigating here?
Well, I do think that there's somewhat of a belated response to this. I wrote a piece in the Hill newspaper saying that, the president was openly mocked for this allegation. People like Clapper said it simply wasn't true. I think that the media has to recognize that this is a serious allegation. I have problems with the name of the professor being outed. If he was an asset for the FBI and CIA,
Right.
I think that's a legitimate concern on the other side. But I think all Americans, regardless of their party, should want to investigate this, and apparently it will be investigated by the IG, the Inspector General's office at the Justice Department.
Right.
And they're a very good outfit. I have no problems with that. They know justice. They've been very hard-hitting. We've seen their work in the past. It's been independent and neutral. I think that is the correct thing to do.
We had Alan Dershowitz on about an hour ago. He said maybe you have an independent panel that looks into it. And then I just got something from somebody else who used to be at the Department of Justice, and they said this should be in front of a grand jury. If this is true, this is criminal.
Well, I think it's premature to put it before a grand jury. We do need a serious investigation. It may end up going there. I prefer the IG's office. I think that the Justice Department did the right thing. This will move faster by giving it to the IG's office. They can refer the matter to the U.S. Attorney's office. They have not been shy about those types of referrals. And so if you want to get at this quickly, I would do it this way. If you create an independent commission, it will be a glacial pace.
Well, it looks like things are picking up because, according to Rudy Giuliani, this could be wrapped up by September 1st if the president sits down around the 4th of July to talk to Mr. Mueller's team.
Well, I think if the president sits down, it will expedite the conclusion. If they can narrow those questions, it is something that he can get through. I mean, people are just assuming that he's going to burst into flames if he sits down and answers questions. I think that really underestimates his ability and his legal team's ability. But if you want to bring this to a conclusion, that's the way to do it. Alternatively, you have to have an end game, because Mueller could very well go for a subpoena, and that will extend this a very long time.
We talked about that last week. All right. Professor, thank you very much for joining us live.
Thank you.
All right. Jonathan Turley. All right. 8:20 here in New York City. Still ahead. The leader of ISIS is not dead. And this morning, he's got a new mission: train kids to become killers. And one state is about to make it legal for kids to bring medical marijuana to school. Is that a step in the right direction or the wrong direction? A debate next.
Hey, yeah, we're just blowing smoke. Hey, yeah, out here going broke.
Happy Monday morning to you. Back with some quick headlines for you. A former mayor of New Orleans awarded for tearing down history, Democrat Mitch Landrieu, given the JFK Profile and Courage Award after removing statues of Robert E. Lee, Jefferson Davis, and 2 others. He went ahead with the move despite legal challenges and arguments the Confederacy is an important part of New Orleans' heritage. Also this, New York City Mayor Bill de Blasio wants the cops to stop doing their jobs. The Democrat telling the NYPD to hand out tickets instead of making arrests. De Blasio says it's in preparation for the eventual marijuana legalization here in New York City. Brian, take it away.
All right, you're going to love this debate. It's a very difficult one, too. Illinois lawmakers voting to allow sick children to bring medical marijuana to school. The bill letting qualified students to consume medical marijuana on school premises as long as they don't smoke it. And school officials agree that it won't disrupt other students. But is that a step in the right or wrong direction? So you're going through chemotherapy or something like that. Here to debate it, Ava Pence. She has a daughter who takes prescribed medical marijuana, and Jeffrey Hunt, Vice President of Public Policy at Colorado Christian University and Director of the Sentinel Institute. So to you, Ava, first off, why is this necessary, do you think?
So first of all, I think that we should reframe what's happening here. These aren't children bringing marijuana to school. This is a product that's being brought to school by a responsible adult and being left in the school health room where it is secured. It's a step in the right direction because this is medicine and it should be treated as such. And if it is allowing these children equal access to an education, it's absolutely necessary.
So, Jeff, you see a downside to this?
Right. Well, Brian, the FDA has clearly said that marijuana is detrimental for children to take. It said this for two reasons. One is that the current science shows that children who take marijuana have long-term detrimental effects when it comes to brain development. And secondly, much of this marijuana that's being prescribed by doctors is not FDA approved. Therefore, we have no idea what the side effects are to it. We have no idea what the long-term effects are. And we have no idea what happens when you combine marijuana with other medication. And then, according to this legislation, we're allowing nurses and teachers and parents to administer this non-approved, non-FDA approved drugs at public schools, which is deeply problematic. We should let the science lead. We should let FDA approved drugs be administered.
All right,
not
okay, I got you.
non-FDA.
Ava, do you think the science is not leading here?
Well, I think it's time to let the science lead, absolutely. So first, I'd like to point to Dr. Davinsky's study. We have a famed neurologist, Orrin Devinsky, who does have a groundbreaking study that does show that science is leading us in this direction. The second thing I'd like to point to is the need to reschedule marijuana to being a Schedule II drug, not a Schedule I drug, so that we can have the sort of research that we need to allow for more research so that we can head in this direction, because I do agree that we need the FDA approval, and we are heading in the direction of FDA approval thanks to Dr. Davinsky's work.
So, Jeff, it just bothers you that a medical doctor with a degree who is certified and above board and gets good reviews might say this child is in pain, needs this medication. It's controlled, so it's not going to go wild throughout the school. If you think that this study shows the doctor really is acting irresponsible.
Well, what we've got to allow is the FDA to be able to do this research, which they need to be able to do, which they haven't been able to do. But let's allow them to do the research. But the problem is, we've seen in other aspects, either tobacco or opioids, where doctors have prescribed opioids and they haven't done it above board. So we need to allow the FDA to be able to make those decisions to determine if it's safe. But the problem with a lot of this legislation is that there's no restrictions on the potency of THC. So we need to not allow the legislation to get ahead of the science on this.
I understand your concern, and for legalizing marijuana, it's legalized medical marijuana in 29 states. But if a doctor that you trust sees a child in pain and this is the only alternative, I find it kind of cruel to deny that child. Especially if it's a doctor that's got, that knows there's other options, and we're trusting him to help you with sinus infections and to heal a broken leg. But when it comes to pain, maybe from chemotherapy, that's where you draw the line?
Well, there are drugs that have been approved by the FDA that have come from marijuana that deal specifically with chemotherapy, that deal with some of those things that have been approved. But this legislation goes way too far. It goes way too far.
All right. It's a good debate.
If I may.
Sadly, we're out of time, Ava, but I think you made your point effectively.
I understand. Thank you.
Ava and Jeff, good debate. No bad guys here, but this is debate worth having. Meanwhile, straight ahead.
Thank you so much.
All right, thanks, guys. Hamas organized violent and deadly riots along the Israeli border the same day the U.S. opens its embassy in Jerusalem. So why did one high school hold a moment of silence for the...
Well, it was a week ago today that on this program you saw the opening of the U.S. Embassy moving from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. While that was happening over at the security fence between Gaza and Israel, you know that there was a melee. There was a lot of violence. At least 60 people were killed, including, I think, 50 members of Hamas. Hamas, of course, famously designated by our government as a terrorist group.
And just about every government.
Right. So there's a high school here in New York City, Beacon High School. It's just a few blocks from here, actually. And they held a moment of silence. A student was the one that was pushing this. A moment of silence for Hamas. And you can imagine there were a lot of parents that are completely outraged about this, saying, how can you hold a moment of silence for Hamas, as we all know, is a group of terrorists? This is from one parent saying, I'm extremely upset because I did not send my child to New York City public school to pray for Hamas operatives.
Yeah, especially when their mandate is to wipe Israel off the face of the earth. They were going to foment their resistance. And on a side note, You don't blame them. Maybe they were watching television. Almost every other channel was focusing on the violence and mocking others who were at this historic ceremony for smiling during it. Eric Stackelbacker is director of the Christians United for Israel. He's a bit of a terror expert. He's very much so. He weighed in on this.
Whether they intended to or not, they, in essence, were honoring Hamas terrorists. Again, most of the people killed were Hamas terrorists. And I have to say, Steve, Jewish students obviously felt very uncomfortable during this moment of silence. They went on record saying as much. As a Christian, I would feel very uncomfortable, to say the least, with this moment of silence because it's honoring terrorists again. And it's frustrating, Steve, to see the mainstream media and others in academia now as well take that Hamas narrative and run with it. At the end of the day, there's not much that separates Hamas from ISIS. Over the past several years, Hamas has fired rockets, missiles at Israel, suicide bombings, terror tunnels, and all the rest.
So we asked the school their response. We haven't heard yet from Beacon High School, but we will let you know soon as they give their response. But your responses have been pouring in because you all have opinions about this as well. John emailed us, said, I'm appalled that school directed their students to take a moment of silence for Gaza. The principal needs to be fired.
I need to point out this was run apparently by a student. The principal has not responded. We got another email, a moment of silence. Hamas has no regard for human life, they write.
And by the way, John Brennan's tweets was more about the riots at Gaza than the moving of the embassy. So you can't even, this student was probably just watching another cable network. I thought that was the most important thing.
Well, they have had moments of silence in the past for the victims of Parkland, but for them to have a school moment of silence for the Gaza victims, that's why people here in New York City are saying, what exactly did they just do?
So keep emailing us your thoughts. Is this something that the school should be doing? Friends at foxnews.com. Want to hear from you.
Jillian, we hope you don't keep silent for this because we're hoping you tell us what's going on in the news.
Only because you asked so kindly,
Right.
Brian. I will
No
do
problem.
that for you. Good morning, and this is a serious story. The leader of ISIS on a chilling new mission, brainwashing school children. One of Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi's former officers telling Iraqi media the leader discussed rewriting ISIS's school curriculum last year. He wanted to focus on ideology. There have been multiple reports claiming the leader is dead or severely wounded since he was last seen in 2014. U.S. officials, though, believe he's still alive. A veteran who sacrificed his legs fighting for our country is slamming Six Flags. Retired U.S. Marine Johnny Joey Jones says he was kicked off a ride for not having, quote, real legs. Jones tweeting the theme park's rules that say, quote, riders must have one functioning arm and one functioning leg, absent of a prosthetic device. Jones, a frequent guest on Fox and Friends, lost his legs in a 2010 bomb explosion in Afghanistan. We've reached out to Six Flags for comment, but have not yet heard back. Here's a question. Would you rather your daughter date a Republican or an MS-13 gang member? Liberal writer Rob Russo said he'd pick the guy in a gang. Nassau County, Long Island Police Commissioner Patrick Ryder joined us earlier to weigh in.
I would love for him to sit down and speak to the victims' families. Tell them that he would rather have a MS-13 date his daughter. MS-13's motto, kill, rape, control. That's what you want dating your daughter?
Ryder says 6 homicides were committed by MS-13 last year in his New York county. This koala is fishing for a new hobby. A family totally shocked when they spotted the wild animal clutching their fishing rod.
Catch anything today, mate?
The family says the koala spent a half an hour sitting along the river in Australia. He didn't get any bites. But don't people always say koalas are actually really, dangerous? Aren't they? Not friendly?
He didn't look very dangerous there.
I know, but aren't right? Am I?
Pandas.
Pandas?
It's always the ones you least expect.
I'll tell you what, they're all cute.
Who are the huggers? Who are the huggers?
I don't know.
Panda bear?
The lima? The lima.
The lima?
Yeah.
I'm not going to try. I'm not going to try it out. We'll let you do it, Brian.
Yeah. So don't hug a koala even though they're squeezable.
You know who I love to hug though is Janice Dean.
Yes.
She gives out some of the best hugs in the world.
You
it's true.
got it. You come down here to 48th and 6th and I will give you a hug. Like this lady
look at
right
that.
here. You came up and gave me a hug, right? Guess what? What's the special day today? It's a birthday. 65. Oh my gosh, you look amazing. What's your name, young lady?
Avery.
Do you love the weather here in New York?
Yes.
Good answer. Where are you guys from? Where are you from?
Florida.
Florida?
Wyoming.
Scarsdale, New York.
Right here.
Right here in New York.
Right here.
Do you like the weather here in New York? It's beautiful. What are you doing for your birthday?
This is my gift. We're doing the Empire State Building. I want to do the corny things. I want to go to the top.
Well, I wish I could gift wrap it for you. But stay tuned. Maybe I'll have a book for you. Hang on. Maybe Brian will come out with one of his books. Let's take a look at the weather maps because it's a beautiful day to be alive here in New York City. 62 right now, 50 in Chicago. We've got 62 in Tulsa. We have a little bit of unsettled weather across the Ohio Valley, the Great Lakes, parts of the Southeast. But New York is going to remain dry today. 77 and warmer weather on the way. 77 in Denver and 78 in Billings. Okay. Anybody you want to say hi to at home?
Hi, Marty.
Okay, nicely done. And what about you? You want to say hi to anybody?
Hi, Daddy.
Oh, I like it. Happy birthday. Come on, group hug. Everybody here, group hug.
Hi, Sedona.
Hi, Sedona. Better with friends.
Hi, kids.
Oh my gosh, keep waving.
Love you.
They still have the camera on us.
All right.
Love it. Sedona, that's a long way away.
Thanks.
Thanks,
JD.
Janice.
Beautiful weather for her 65th birthday.
Finally.
All right. Meanwhile, straight ahead, final goodbyes begin for the victims in the Santa Fe, Texas high school shooting as chilling video gives us a new look at the shooter. We got a live report from Texas next.
Plus, Budweiser teaming up with Folds of Honor, one of our favorite charities here, to assist Gold Star families and salute their veteran brewers.
I had no idea that this is what we were doing. You're our heroes. I salute you. Thank all of y'all.
It's an emotional video. That veteran brewer is here live, and he's sharing their special beer inspired by George Washington's handwritten recipe. That's real. That's coming up just ahead. You don't want to miss it.
Pop star Kelly Clarkson calling for gun control at the Billboard Music Awards last night. The host says she was instructed to hold a moment of silence for the victims of the Santa Fe, Texas school shooting, but she refused.
I'm so sick of moment of silence. Like, God, it's not working. Why don't we do moment of action? Why don't we do moment of change? Why don't we change what's happening? Because it's horrible. We need to do better. So people are failing our children, we're failing our communities, we're failing their families.
Later in the program, Parkland shooting survivors joining Shawn Mendes and Khalid on stage for a performance.
Well, on that note, Texas Governor Greg Abbott calling for a moment of silence today to honor the lives lost in the Santa Fe high school shooting.
This comes as thousands turn out to honor the first of the victims being laid to rest.
All right, Doug McKelway is live in Santa Fe and joins us now with a survivor. Hey, Doug.
Hey, Brian, great to see you. You know, in the face of such unspeakable tragedy, it's a common sense and a human desire to try to find something good that comes out of this. And we have certainly found something really, really good here. And I want to introduce you all to Rome Schubert and his mom, Sherry Schubert. Rome was in the attack. He was in the arts classroom when the shooter aimed at these young students, and he was struck in the back of the head. Miraculously survived. The bullet exited from his neck. Rome, why don't you just show our viewers? I want people, because I know there's a lot of people who don't believe that you're telling the truth. The bullet came in the back of his neck right here.
The bullet came in here. Right here.
Yeah.
The bullet came in there, and it went.
And you can see the exit wound.
There's the exit wound.
Right there. And he was able to get up and run out. Didn't know that he'd even been struck, and you jumped over a wall, correct?
Yeah, about a 7-foot wall, and I got about 100, 200 feet away from the art room, and I saw some blood on me. No idea I had even been shot. Somebody came up behind me and said, "You've been shot," and I thought it was somebody else's blood. Still hadn't even felt it, and so I just took my shirt off and put pressure to it and just took off to the parking lot.
Mm-hmm. And Mr. Schubert, I understand from talking to your husband a little bit earlier this morning that you guys were struggling to try to find out what had become of your son. You had no idea.
Yeah, we had. Absolutely no idea. It was, we got a call from his girlfriend, Maddie, at 8 and said that there had been a shooting at the high school and she couldn't get a hold of him. She had been texting him. He wasn't returning our phone calls. And then I tried, and then all of our baseball moms started calling me and saying, "I've talked to my son, I've talked to my daughter, and still at that point I still hadn't talked to Rome. I was just driving around in circles. I couldn't get up here, and then finally my friend Tara, she just she said, "Park, I'm coming to pick you up," because at that point she knew probably something happened to Rome.
In Rome, you kept your wits about you this whole time when you were in the hospital. You got a nurse's phone, as I understand it, right? You called your parents to let them know.
Yeah, I asked the paramedic if he had his phone, but he did not have his phone on him. So once I was in the hospital and they took care of everything about evaluating me wise, I asked the nurse if I could use her phone to call my parents.
And what went through your mind when you first heard that voice?
Oh, I belted out and just screamed hallelujah, praise Jesus, because it was the scariest moment of my life not hearing from him.
And when you first laid eyes on him in the hospital?
I just started bawling, crying. I walked in the room and I just laid my head on his chest, and I just was like, thank you, God. Thank you, God. Thank you, God, for your grace.
And your husband told me that when you came back home and went to bed, he kept going into his bedroom to check on him as if he were a newborn baby. That really kind of brings it home to me. By the way, Rome is a spectacular baseball pitcher. He's a sophomore on the baseball team here, has several more years to go, but he's already been offered a scholarship to the University of Houston, which is really great because it's just up the road. You're not going to let him out of your sight, are you?
No. I was checking on him, making sure he was breathing all night.
All right. Thanks, Rome. Best of luck to you. We're glad you're here. I know your parents are just so happy, and so is everybody else. Thanks for taking some time to talk to us.
Thank you.
Back to you in New York.
Doug, what a great interview. Thank you so much.
Very much.
Every parent's worst nightmare.
And
waiting for that call.
I know. I'd been reading about that kid who got shot in the back. If it would have gone that much further, and he didn't even know. Very bad situation.
He ran under the table and found out moments later that he was shot.
And the day after the shooting, he played baseball.
Unbelievable.
All right, 12 minutes now before the top of the hour. Up next, Daniel Romero is a Budweiser brewer and a veteran. He's here to share their special beer inspired by George Washington's handwritten beer recipe and tells us how it's helping assist Gold Star families.
I'm able to gain my education and have a future for my son and myself.
Receiving Folds of Honor has taken a huge just burden off of our lives.
My family is so proud of you and everything that you've done to contribute to our lives. I am honored to be in your presence.
I'm blown away. I didn't know. And we can still serve in a way, because once you stop serving, you felt like you stopped. And it's nice to be able to keep giving back.
I had no idea that this is what we were doing. You're our heroes. I salute you. Thank all of y'all.
Wow, that is powerful. Just gives you chills. Budweiser, yet again, teaming up with Folds of Honor to assist Gold Star families and salute their veteran brewers.
And we're joined right now by one of those brewers himself in person, a veteran, retired Marine Corps Sergeant Daniel Romero. Daniel, great to see you.
Good to be here. Thank you for having me.
Why did you want to serve?
Why? To protect our freedoms, to serve our country, to make sure that the rights are protected from not only for myself, but for our children and our future. And it's a great honor. Thank you for having me. I'm so blessed to be here. Thank you.
We're so lucky to have you. Well, you're still serving, but now you're serving Budweiser.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Tell us a little bit about the red lager, because this is historic.
Oh, from what I understand, this is an old recipe from President George Washington, and we remade it the way he had a pin recipe.
1756.
Yes, he had a recipe that we followed to the letter, and this is the result: the Freedom Reserve red lager. Yes, sir.
And the proceeds go to
the Folds of Honor. Yes, sir. For every package that we sell, $1 is donated to the Folds of Honor.
What does this mean for veterans? We played a little bit of that video. It is so incredibly emotional.
The interaction when we finally got to meet the recipients of the Folds of Honor, we thought they were tourists. We thought they were just there at our brewery to tour the brewery and taste our product. But it turns out that they were there actually to let us know what we didn't know we were doing. And they let, it was just an amazing interaction because we could feel their pain. We could feel, every one of us that was standing on the veteran side could feel what they were going through, that they lost loved ones. It brought back memories of when I served, and stuff that I hadn't thought about in several years. It was brought back, and it was emotional. Yes,
Daniel, am I right? Like when you stop serving, you go, what do I do next?
Yes.
Because your life is so regimented. Now what? There's no format.
Right, exactly. And that in this process, we're able to, not knowingly, but be able to give back to our veterans, to our families, and our fallen heroes. And it's a great, great honor. The company of Anheuser-Busch does an amazing job of helping our veterans and supporting our veterans.
Are there any other job openings at Budweiser?
Yes,
That's
absolutely. Yes.
Well, last year, Budweiser had America. That was the beer.
Yes, sir.
And raised millions of dollars
Yes,
for
sir. Yes, sir.
Folds of Honor. This year, Freedom Reserve Red Lager. And you're actually brewing it up where you work down in Georgia,
in
right?
Cartersville, Georgia. Yes, sir. How'd everybody back at the brewery?
Here's the big question. Did
Yes, sir.
George Washington did he make beer that we like?
Oh, you're going to love it.
Is it good?
It's awesome. It's a great beer.
What does it taste like?
A little syrupy, a little molassy, but a little molasses in it. But it tastes great. It's a great tasting beer.
I like
You'll
it.
enjoy
Drink it slow then.
That's right. Look, now there are going to be a lot of people who want to taste George Washington's brew. It's the Freedom Reserve, the Red Lager, and of course it goes to benefit Folds of Honor. By the way, this program will be live at the Patriot Cup down in Oklahoma a week from today on Memorial Day.
That'll be great.
It will be.
Sergeant, thank you for your service, and thank you for being with us.
Thank you
for
for
all
having
you
me.
do.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Is it too early for a beer?
No,
Okay.
it's 5 o'clock somewhere.
Cheers.
Right back.